Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, a couple reports back, we talked about how the internet was being shipped off to the UN, and it happened. The United States now is not in control of the ICANN service, and we see the UN has full control. And we understand that the UN has their own rules in what they consider free speech, what they consider what should be censored, what should not be censored. And we see here in the United States, there were 77 U.S. senators that voted yes to give away the internet to the UN. And we understand that this is part of the process of creating a one world government, taking control of the internet. So this way they can censor anything they want at any time. And the U.S. government central bankers can say, hey, it's the UN. We want to give you free speech, but it's the UN that decided to censor it. And where are you going to argue the case that how dare you censor this website or this podcast or this video? It's going to be very difficult. And this is exactly what they want. Is it going to happen by tomorrow? No. But it will happen over time. And you'll be surfing the internet, and all of a sudden you'll come up to a message that says, sorry, this website is censored. Sorry, this video is censored by the UN. And that will be that. There was a survey that was done, and it looks like the United States is not the freest country in the world. According to the Legatum Prosperity Index, it found that the U.S. has dropped to the 15th most free country in the world, behind Costa Rica, Uruguay, among others. Perhaps even more staggering is that the U.S. dropped to 33rd in terms of safety and security, ranking behind Slovakia and just ahead of United Arab Emirates. And of course, as we know, the United States government central bankers continually tell us how they have to keep us safe, how we need more security, how it's going to make it better. And they've been doing this since 2001, the last 15 years. And the U.S. has dropped to 33 because the U.S. government central bankers, they're not keeping the people safe. They're controlling the people. We have to remember, most of these events are created by the government to scare the people, to take away their rights, to scare them into submission. That's what this is about. And there's proof that whatever they're doing doesn't work, if you want to believe the official story, that they need to keep us safe. So we can see right now that all of this, where we're the freest in the world, we're the safest in the world, well, it's just not true. Actually, maybe if we remove the government and put in a smaller government that's not controlled by foreign entities, corporations, central banks, maybe we would be the freest country. Maybe we would be the safest country, where we wouldn't see all these events. Most likely, yes. We see John Kerry is out in Brussels. He was giving a speech, and he came out and said the U.S. remains committed to protecting Ukraine from Russian aggression. Now, we have to understand what's happening in Ukraine. We realize that the central bankers had a coup d'etat in Ukraine. They didn't get the entire country. They don't have the southeastern area where they have coal production, manufacturing. They didn't get Crimea, where there's the port. And right now, all they have is the west of Ukraine. And this is a problem for the central bankers. This is why the United States and other nations are in there, supplying them with non-lethal and now lethal weapons, and training their National Guard, their armed forces, police forces, bringing in U.S. advisors. Because what we can see right now, this is the buildup for another offensive. They tried to get something kicked off the ground when they had their agent provocateurs go into Crimea, tried to have some type of false flag, and the whole thing just completely fell apart to try to start the war with Russia in Crimea and the southeastern area. We see U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry called for Russia, China, Pakistan, India, and Iran to help Afghanistan overcome its problems. Well, we can see right now the United States is having a very tough time because the people of Afghanistan are saying we've had enough of the United States government central bankers in our country. Remember, Afghanistan is a very, very strategic area. They have oil, lithium, copper. Russia, China are in there working with the government. United States is growing poppies, protecting the poppy fields, using the poppies to sell overseas to pay for their covert missions, their covert military operations around the world. And this is what they're actually protecting. They're not doing it for the people. They're doing it for themselves, for the profit, to wage war on other countries. We see Russia is calling on the U.S. to return to Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. Now, this treaty was signed in 1987. The treaty prohibits the development, testing, or fielding of ground-based cruise missiles with a range of 300 to 3,400 miles. And we can see right now, both countries are pointing at each other, saying, listen, you're not abiding by this treaty, because we can see right now the U.S. government central bankers, they don't want to abide by this treaty because they're getting ready for war. They're getting ready to create some type of an event to bring us to war. Now, the U.S. right now, since they didn't get Crimea to have ships on the Black Sea, they're building a deep sea port in Georgia. And we can see right now they're telling us that it's for cargo transit from Asia to Europe. But there might be a hidden agenda behind all of this. Most likely they're building this port right on the Black Sea so they can turn it into a U.S. naval base. And it would be right near Russia. This is actually why they wanted Ukraine. So we can see right now they're continually preparing for the next stage. And they're moving military assets all over the world, moving troops all over the world. It has not died down. It has actually accelerated. We see Iraq is warning Turkey that they need to withdraw their troops from Iraq. Remember, Turkey invaded Iraq. Iraq has been telling Turkey to get out of their country. Turkey has invaded Syria. The United States has invaded Syria. The UK, France, all have invaded these countries. They did not get permission to be in Syria. Turkey didn't get permission to be in Iraq. And they're warning that this might trigger a regional war by keeping the troops in their territory. And this is exactly what the U.S. government central bankers want. They want a war to break out anyway, anywhere they possibly can make it happen. They don't care, because they'll just ramp it up, because the players are all the same. Now, John Kerry is slamming Russia for backing the Syrian government. He's criticizing Russia for supporting Assad, describing it as irresponsible, profoundly ill-advised. Well, the only reason he's saying this is because Russia and Syria are kicking out the United States, kicking out their terrorist groups. They're winning the war. And you can see right now the United States is using any type of propaganda they possibly can to try to get back into the game. Remember, all this is about is the petrodollar building a oil pipeline through Syria. Assad objected. A couple months later, all of a sudden, we had riots, protests, a civil war, all funded by the United States. The moderate rebels weren't even moderate rebels back then. They were Al-Qaeda. And then all of a sudden it broke that the United States was supporting Al-Qaeda, and then they started calling them the moderate rebels. But we know they're all one and the same. And we can see right now that they're pushing war as hard as they possibly can. And they're going to be using more and more propaganda to get this started. Now, we know out in Syria the battle is continuing in Aleppo, and we see right now the Syrian government, the Russian government, they're going to be reducing their airstrikes and shelling in eastern Aleppo. They're going to allow civilians to leave this area. They want all the civilians out because they want to clean up the rest of the terrorists. And this is what the United States government central bankers, this is what they're worried about, that Russia and Syria are going to have all the civilians, or most of them, leave, so this way they can go all out on their terrorist mercenaries. And once they clear Aleppo and they take Aleppo back, the United States government central bankers, they are in a corner right now. This is something they probably didn't even expect. And now they're going to have to do something else. Most likely some type of an event. And most likely this is something we're going to see. We see Russia is taking no chances whatsoever. They're bringing in 2 warships. These are armed with Caliber cruise missiles. They'll join the permanent grouping of Russia's Navy in the Mediterranean Sea. And we can see right now they have the aircraft carrier there. They're bringing in more warships. They realize that the United States, well, they're about to do something. And they're expecting it. We see right now the U.S. blocked Russia's statement on the shelling of its embassy in Damascus at the United Nations Security Council. The embassy was shelled from the Jobar municipality controlled by the U.S. terrorists. And this is what the U.S. normally does in the UN Security Council. When something comes out that they don't like and it points to their terrorist groups, they usually block it. They did it once before where Russia and Syria were bringing up the instance of when Turkey was firing missiles from Turkey into Syria, and the United States at that time decided to block it. They figured no one needed to know about that because what they were doing, they were creating the corridor for the terrorists to come in. And every time the United States doesn't want something to be heard, what they normally do is they block it in the UN. And of course, a lot of people don't realize that this is happening. And we can see right now from all of this, from what's happening in the UN and how the United States blocks certain resolutions, we realize their entire agenda is to protect their terrorist groups. Now, Obama has really gone off the deep end. I know he's out there talking about global warming, climate change, whatever they like to call it today. They keep changing it because they're losing the narrative of the story. I know he wants all the countries to sign on because they're trying to push a carbon tax. But this is how you know this is all made up. Because Obama was out there. He was saying global warming contributed to the Syrian civil war. And he's saying that because of the droughts that happened in Syria, it contributed to the unrest, and a civil war broke out. Well, I guess he forgot to mention that they wanted to build a gas pipeline through Syria. They asked Assad, he rejected it. Then all of a sudden we had an uprising of people out of nowhere. And then that didn't work. So all of a sudden a civil war broke out because the United States brought in Al-Qaeda and paid mercenaries to fight in this civil war to remove Assad. That didn't work out. And they kept on adding to the paid mercenaries and the terrorists. The corporate media found out that the United States was arming Al-Qaeda. Then the United States said, well, they're not really Al-Qaeda, they're moderate rebels. So we have nothing to do with Al-Qaeda. Then we find out they were having all these false flags saying that Assad gassed his own people, which turned out to be Al-Qaeda who did it. Then the United States spent billions of dollars creating the Islamic State, trained them in Jordan, trained them in Turkey, waited for the elections of 2014 in June to see what the people would do if they would vote Assad as president, and they did. And then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, the Islamic State appeared. And then the U.S. government said, we have to bomb inside of Syria to get rid of the Islamic State. The bombing went on for a year. Tens of thousands of bombs were dropped, and the Islamic State expanded their territory inside of Syria. Russia decided to step in and said, we're going to help out. The United States didn't want Russia. They didn't want China, because their mission was not to destroy the Islamic State. It was to expand their territory. The Islamic State was taking the oil from the oil fields in Syria and trafficking it up to Turkey to pay for the entire operation. The United States placed sanctions on Syria, which made it very difficult for humanitarian aid, for food and other supplies to get in there. This had nothing to do with global warming. This had to do with the United States. This is how you know this entire thing is fake, phony, and false. What they're saying to the entire world, what he's saying to the entire world, is one gigantic lie. That's it. This entire thing is to keep the petrodollar, the central banks, their way of life, continually moving along. They know they need to get into more countries. This was planned way back. General Wesley C. Clark came out and said that they were going to do this way ahead of time, that they were going to go into Sudan, into Libya, into Lebanon, into Iraq, into Syria, then into Iran. They already had it planned out. This has nothing to do with global warming. The whole thing is made up. Now, in past reports, we always do a check to see where we are, because we understand the United States government central bankers, they're in the process of closing down our society. And Naomi Wolf created a 10-step breakdown of how a society is closed down. And she did research, and this 10 steps fits into every model of every society closing down. And the first one is invoke a terrifying internal or external enemy, which they did create. They created the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and they made us believe that we are under threat and the Islamic State is all over the place. Create a gulag. So basically, once you have everyone scared, the next step is to create a prison system outside the rule of law, which they did. Guantanamo Bay. And this way, all those people out there, they were able to arrest them, detain them without due process. We know we had one in Chicago where they were doing it, and most likely others around the country. So 2 of these things have already come true. 3, develop a thug caste. When leaders who seek what I call a fascist shift want to close down an open society, they send paramilitary groups of scary young men out to terrorize citizens. The black shirts roamed the Italian countryside. The brown shirts were in Germany. What do we have here? DHS. We have militarized police. We're seeing it here in the United States. Set up an internal surveillance system. Well, we just got word that the United States government central bankers are spying on every single person through Yahoo, through their email. They created a software program for them. We also know the NSA has been spying on everyone. We know that they have these devices called Stingray. We know it's being done. So far, 4 have been met. The next one, harass citizen groups. Well, are they not doing that? Those people who are speaking out freely get harassed. They're harassing the Muslims. They're harassing everyone. Anyone that speaks out against the U.S., anyone that wants to talk about the U.S. government, the Internal Revenue Service is going after certain individuals. So yeah, that's already started also. engage in arbitrary detention and release. And we can see they do this to many people today. They stop them on the road. They stop them at checkpoints. They hold them. In a closing society or a closed society, there's a list of dissidents and opposition leaders. You are targeted in this way once you are on the list, and it's very hard to get very hard to get off the list. Think about the no-fly list. How about the no-fly list? If you're on that, you can't own a weapon. So we're already seeing this happen. Target key individuals. Threaten civil servants, artists, academics with job loss if they don't do what they say. Well, we are seeing this. James Tracy, he spoke out about the shooting in Sandy Hook, and he was let go. And now he's suing. And we've seen this with many different people. The next one, control the press. Well, they have full control of the press. And the only thing they didn't have control of was the internet, alternative media, people posting videos, people posting things on social networks. Well, what did they just do? They just gave away the control of the internet to the UN. They're trying to control the press completely. The next one is dissent equals treason. Cast dissent as treason and criticism as espionage. Every closing society does this, just as it elaborates laws that increasingly criminalize certain kinds of speech and expand the definition of spy and traitor. And we are seeing this. Look at Edward Snowden, spoke out about what the NSA was doing, spying on the people, violating their rights. The last one, number 10, suspend the rule of law. Aren't we already seeing this? Aren't there two sets of laws right now? The president right now doesn't even work with Congress. He just writes executive orders and says, now this is the rule of the land. We know a lot of the government employees don't even follow the rule of law. The people follow a different set of laws. So here we are. We're at the point where this society has been completely closed down. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.